Okay, hello to everybody. We have gathered together to read The Missing Link. We'll do introductions later. I'm Bill Pettit. There's Judy Sedgeman, David Hill, Ofer Meyer, and Brad Gallup. And we're going to start right in with the introduction by Mr. Sidney Banks on Roman numeral 10. It's very short, but very powerful. To me, at least, it has been. There are those in this world who believe miracles do not happen. I can assure such skeptics that they do. With hope and faith as beacons, anything can happen. If these writings bring a second chance of life to just one human being, my work has not been in vain. Sidney Banks, March 1998. And throughout this book, at times, Mr. Banks writes in italics. And I think rather than bold, it's interesting that he chose italics rather than bold, because it's not that he wants us to listen harder at those moments. I think he wants us to listen a little softer and a little quieter. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to my good friend, Judy Sedgeman.
This is the first chapter called The Missing Link. One of the greatest misconceptions ever is the belief that it takes years to find wisdom. Many experience time, few experience wisdom. The achievement of mental stability and peace of mind is one thought away from everyone on earth, if you can find that one thought. Well, this page is one of my favorites because for the first 2 years that I knew about this book and would listen to Sid talk about finding that one thought, I believed there was a magic thought. And I was waiting for him to tell us, so what's the thought? And I was too scared to ask, but I kept thinking, well, someday he's just going to blurt it out and then we'll all know the thought. And I think a lot of times we get the idea that somebody knows something we don't know. And what he's really pointing to here is that it's the insight that you need. Mm-hmm. That all of us, when we experience wisdom, it comes in the form of our thought that we suddenly realize is the thought we wanted, that we needed.
That allows things to make sense, finally. Yeah. David?
Yeah, sure. Throughout time, human beings have experienced insights that have spontaneously and completely changed their behavior and their lives, bringing them happiness they previously thought impossible. Finding wisdom has nothing to do with time. Achieving mental stability is a matter of finding healthy thoughts from moment to moment. Such thoughts can be light years or a second away.
I think the idea that finding wisdom has nothing to do with time is foreign to a lot of people who think, well, as you grow older, you get wisdom. Well, we see that sometimes, but sometimes we don't see it. And I won't point out any examples at this point. Okay. Ofer?
So the spiritual energy of all things, whether in form or formless, is known by many names. Nature is the physical form the spiritual energy has taken. Believe me, the subtle truth all people seek will never be found in the illusion of form called nature. Look deep inside your soul. This is where you will find the answer. I actually like this particular page, especially, because for me, this is something I always have to remember again. I think people's instinct, and mine as well, is to always look for answers in the physical form, in the physical realm. And because it's like it's an instinct, it makes, and then everything looks complicated. Mm-hmm. And once I remember, the answer is not something I need to solve in this world, but it's like it's something that I have to look inside, that I have to let it come to me. I don't have to find it. For me, it changed a lot, understanding that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's beautiful, Ofer. I unlike at least the three of you, were not a combat veteran. I was in the was in during the Vietnam era, but in a safe place. So I have not experienced some of the things or had to do some of the things that people in war have to do. And yet I've certainly worked with people from many, many conflicts in different parts of the world. And my experience is that most people who experience chronic, what we call chronic stress or chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, the answer is not psychological, it's spiritual. Because there's no answer to some of the things in the rational intellectual mind, from the rational intellectual mind. There's just no answers there. And it has to be in the spiritual, in the nature of what it means to be human, and our connection to each other, and how we create our experience moment to moment. I know I'm jumping ahead, but this page always strikes me how Sid jumps from one portal to another to open, for us to open. In one moment, he's talking about thoughts can be light years away or a second away, and then bam, he hits us with the spiritual energy of all things in form or formless, is known by many names, and kind of wakes you up again. Like there's a show in the United States called NCIS where this arrogant young investigator when he gets flippant, he gets smacked in the back of the head. And I feel like Sid does that verbally sometimes. He smacks us in the back of the head and wakes us up. Anyway, more gently than
gently, but he's telling you it's deeper than you thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Brad, did you want to go forward?
Yeah. Your thoughts and feelings are a mirror of your soul. Each living soul experiences life as an individual. That is why all humans live and see a separate reality. The divine truth that lives within each living soul never changes. It is internal. The divine passes from the formless to the form, and as human beings, we're both spectators and participants in a spiritual theater called life. Yeah, this is a powerful page for me. Just with the first sentence right there, your thoughts and feelings are a mirror of your soul. It just really brings home how this is all a spiritual journey. And he just goes on to talk to it here. And that we each all live and see a separate reality. That's a powerful one for me to know that that's going on with every person on the planet.
Right.
At the same time. So
that's that'd be the first thing they taught us in grade school.
Yeah.
You think, right? Yeah. I was 41.
I think that little children know that. They live in such fantasies, and they really love each other's fantasies. You know, and then they, as they get told that you've got to tell the truth about what's real and what's not, you know, that they lose that gift of appreciating the fantastical capacity of the human mind.
Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But yeah, the divine passes from the formless to the form. And as human beings, we're both spectators and participants in the spiritual theater called life.
Wow.
Just that one right there is is the jewel for me.
It really has everything in one kernel, doesn't it? When I think of that, I don't mean to interrupt you, Brad. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please, Bill.
I mean, well, I just, I kind of laugh because the divine passes from the formless to the form. We've been told there was this moment of creation that the scientists tell us was 13.8 billion years ago. But I tell people it doesn't matter when you think that happened, that there was a time when there was no form. And even the physicists who used to claim there was a little bit of form, on the top of, like the amount that on the top 1/10 of a millionth on top of a needlehead. And now they admit that was bullshit, And, that they just had trouble accepting that there was a moment in time when there was no form, no matter, that there was only a formless energy. And that this little paragraph here made sense what I was taught, that God is everywhere. Because if you call that energy that was there before God, we call it whatever you want to call it. The label does, to me, is not the thing. But then everything that takes form has to be made of that energy. And so, of course, if you call it God, then God is everywhere, even in this mouse, in this pen, in this piece of paper. And what used to sound crazy as a kid makes absolute sense to me. And then you hear people like Einstein saying the entire universe is the same energy in a different disguise. Or the Dalai Lama saying, the entire universe is one divine atom. Or Sid saying it's one divine cell. And that means that we as human beings, unlike this chair, which I don't think has consciousness, I don't know that it's complaining about how much I weigh, but you and I have consciousness, so we can be aware that we're divine energy, unlike much of life that doesn't have that gift that to get to be a spectator and a participant. Anyway, that I don't mean to wax on, but to me, that little paragraph, every one of those four, like you said, Brad, your thoughts and feelings are a mirror of the soul. For a long time, I thought, what does that mean? And I'd be interested to hear from those of you, because what came to me one time was the metaphor of pure water, fresh spring water coming out of the mountains here in the Rocky Mountains, and it's pure consciousness. It's pure. That's what our soul is. It says, and then we can innocently contaminate it, like some of the companies throwing chemicals into that water as it comes down into the rivers, or people throwing garbage, and we can innocently do that with our thinking, and our feelings let us know that, and it's a mirror of our state of consciousness, if you will. I don't know. Does anybody want to comment on that? Am I way off here? Or
no? I was struggling to start off with a little bit with that, Bill, but you're absolutely right, because if your thoughts and feelings are off, then the mirror's foggy. You're not getting a true reflection of your soul.
Right.
So I suppose that makes sense now. But when you started, I was struggling with that, but it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Well, if you think of soul and consciousness as the same thing, and you think of levels of consciousness, it's really a mirror of the reflection of the purity of your own thinking.
Right.
So if it doesn't look right, then it's probably not right.
So sometimes it looks like the funhouse mirror.
Yeah.
Okay. Your turn.
My turn, huh? The great mystics of the world who tried to explain such knowledge had no choice but to speak in metaphors. Knowing their words were only a representation of the spiritual wisdom that lies within the consciousness of all human beings. All being, listen up. I'm not kidding about this. All human psyches are rooted in universal truth, and no person's psyche is better than any other's. Only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. Wow. And people would ask Sid, and they could ask me, does this mean people that are in the back rooms of state mental hospitals? Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm. And without going into it, many of you have heard my stories that are only a few of what's happening. I was struck by when the Germans went into Russia, and I really would like to find those papers. When they were they were trying to take Russia, they bombed a number of mental hospitals. And there were stories, and I'm trying to think where I read this, of these people that had not spoken or had been mute, had been catatonic. Suddenly, in the midst of that horror of the bombs hitting and fires, they went to each other's rescue. They stopped bleeding. They helped people to safety. They did all the things a human being does when seeing another human being in pain, because what they saw in front of them was more important than the thoughts that they had been locked into, and it freed them to become what they were again, to be human again. Anyway, that's what I think of. The other thing I think of when I write this, I often put, if I have somebody, and you hesitate to even make a name because there might be somebody of that name, but Peter Peffenpfeffer. I always say if he's been depressed for 40 years and he has no hope, I often say, oh my gosh, Peter, I never realized there was an asterisk here. That it says spiritual wisdom lies within the consciousness of all human beings except for Peter Peffenpfeffer. And they do what Judy just did. They laugh. Well, no, there's no asterisk here.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're like the rest of us.
Too bad.
Well, this is the end of the. Oh no, it isn't.
No, it's not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Words are merely a form. Listen not to words, but to that which the words attempt to convey. Remember, it is not the clay that represents the sculpture, but the form the artist has molded it into. Just like the clay of the sculpture, thought is not reality. However, our personal realities are molded via our thoughts. And it's interesting, this page means a lot to me because I'm a writer and my son-in-law and my grandson are artists. And I really believe that well-chosen words can move the world. And my son-in-law and my grandson believe that images and forms can move the world. And as an example of that, my son-in-law is now working with cheap plastic that he tapes together into interesting geometric forms and then blows up giant things and creates this sort of fantastical landscape of puffy, blown up shapes. And he's actually going to have a show at Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh where dancers, a dance troupe, has decided to choreograph through and around his shapes.
Wow.
And it's such an interesting concept that they're opening up a large gallery at the Carnegie for him to have this performance art. And he was talking to me about it yesterday, and he said the entire thing cost me $100 in materials.
Wow.
And he said it's not the material, it's what you can imagine it to be. And I thought of this page, as a matter of fact, when he said that, because I've taught this book a lot, so I kind of know it. But that, you know, it's the form the artist has molded it into. It's not the clay. The clay is nothing. But it's what each of us make and create of our own life. And with the vision for the life that you want, you can create anything.
Wow. Anything before David goes forward? David, you want to?
Sure, yeah. At the moment of birth, the virgin mind discovers creation and the duality of life is born. Henceforth, you live in a world governed by thought. When clarity and purity of thought are present, the answer you seek will be present itself, for what you seek is with you and has been with you always. In the silence of our minds lies the creative incubation, bringing the wisdom and the joy we all seek. I think what I like about this one is the fact that you know, from the moment we're born, we're starting to be shaped by what we see and our personal interpretation of that, which only ever comes through our thinking. But we just don't know it, and it's mad to think that you're sort of going off on your own little tangent, potentially thinking that others are seeing things the same way that you are. But I also love the fact that when everything is calm inside you, you can see the answer straight away, and that's always there. And you know that that's just such a wonderful gift to know that that's the case, and to be able to help people to identify that and see that for themselves, because we will have all experienced that calm. We just won't have ever, or not necessarily, been able to pin the two things together and see that link between a clarity of mind and the answer being within you already. And I think that's, you know, an amazing gift.
Oh, you know, I would be interested, those of you that are veterans and that would be speaking with people at this point in the first chapter that might be looking for hope, living in a hell in their head.
Mm-hmm.
That whether that sounds Pollyannish, that or whether it would awaken hope that the answer you're seeking is present with you always and has been with you always. That even in this incredible pain of painful memories and thoughts and of things happen and maybe things done, etc., that there is something that is with you and it's been with you always, and in the silence of your mind lies this wisdom and that will bring creative incubation, will bring the wisdom and joy. I'd love to hear comments whether you think that will maybe be at least a crack of hope to some people, or sound unrealistic, or maybe both. Ofer, Brad, and Dave.
Tell you two things that comes to mind for me. We have a mutual friend. I won't speak about his name, but he's also a veteran, and he actually he sat at home for like 20 years until he one day tried to commit suicide, and even for like he didn't make it. But even after he did it, he wouldn't listen. He just would sit at home and do nothing for years and years. And I was like, I gave up hope, for him. I withdrew, and we were like best friends because I said, okay, he's gonna kill himself eventually, and I can't deal with that again because the first time was a shocker for me.
Right.
And then one day he got up, and then he had like a tremendous change, and I didn't understand. It was like, what happened? And I remember I came and I sat with him, and he just said, I woke up one morning, and I felt this feeling of craziness and fear coming again. And at that moment, I realized I have two choices. Either I kill myself or I go crazy. And then he said, or maybe I should just go and run. And he went outside and started running. And he became quiet. And that's it. And after that, he woke up and he just started doing it. I mean, it just happened. It was spontaneous. And he started seeing that his thought is what creating his misery. And he realized that he can't control them, but he can work. The minute he understood, and it just happened, it just happened.
Right.
And it was there for him. He didn't, even if he heard it, it was there. And for me, it was a miracle, So
Miracles happen.
I think that, I think that for me is, it's kind of like a living proof that when it was time, it just saw it. He just saw it, and that's it. Things started changing.
But it does speak to what this says, that it was within him, looking for the littlest crack to come through, isn't it? I mean, it was just waiting, and his first decision was to run rather than to kill himself or go crazy. Allowed him to quiet the crack opened and it came through. I mean, I don't know.
That was the crack for him. I think that moment for him was like, wait, I don't have to do either. I can just do something else. And that started he suddenly got an insight that he doesn't have to stay with his thinking. He can just, move on.
Wow.
Was, for me, it was that, he got it by himself. No one. And another thing that came to mind is that in the last section, it says, in the silence of our minds lies creating incubation, bringing the wisdom and joy we are sick. And it actually sends me to when I was in my 20s and I was a musician. And I used to compose songs with my friend. And he used to compose like a theme or something. And I would listen to it and I would write the lyrics. And I remember I wouldn't think about it. I would just listen to it and close my eyes and clear my head. And then the lyrics would just write themselves out.
Oh.
And that's for me, it was always there. There was always more lyrics to come out. I didn't have to do anything. It just came. And if I tried to think of something, it would never come. But so it's and that's this creative incubation. Okay, so it works for lyrics at that moment, but it works for everything. Like you can get answers, you can get insights. You just have to like stop and be able to just let it come to you. And so that's what came to my mind.
Stop looking for it in the intellect, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brad, did you have anything or that you wanted to add?
No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful story about there was only two choices, and all of a sudden a third choice in an instant presented itself, and he took it, and it changed everything. And that's, I think this whole thing, especially in the second paragraph here, when it says, with clarity and purity of your thought are present, the answer you seek will present itself, for what you seek is with you and has been with you always. And I think offering, when I work with veterans, this idea that they can just allow their thoughts to settle for just a moment, which I think I heard happen with your friend. Wisdom showed up.
Yeah.
It presented itself. And that's where the third option comes. And so it's so hopeful, especially these guys that have no hope,
Could I toss a question into the mix before we have another answer? A lot of the veterans that I work with tell me that it's very hard for them, although it makes sense, that it's very hard for them to believe in or even look for their own instructions, from something from within, because they're so trained to wait for somebody to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. And they come to groups, and in almost all the other groups they go to, that's what happens. People give them advice or put them through exercises or tell them what to do, reframe that or change this or whatever. And that's the challenge that I see. I think this book, the reason Sid's book is very helpful, is that it can touch that. But I never thought of it before, that if you've been in service for a really long time, you just don't think for yourself anymore. You don't, and you're actually punished if you do.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I work with horses. When I work with guys and women, because when I put them in the round pen with the horse at liberty, they go, "Now what do I do?"
Yeah.
And this is where I ask them to get curious, and let their thinking fall. Just trust themselves. If like they were 5 years old again or 4 years old again, and just something will show up, and we're just going to play with it. And when they hear that, they step in there with, you see their faces light up, and then when they approach the horse, something magical happens.
Yeah.
And then I say right there, when they see it, I say, that's your wisdom. That's how easy that is. You can do it without a horse. But this is just a way to jumpstart that.
Yeah.
Where you can start to see that it's always there. It's just your thinking's covered it up.
Thank you. When you're telling that story, if it's okay if I share something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So 2 days ago, I was in a group with 10 veterans, and one of them started swimming recently, and turns out that for the past 38 years of his life, he was afraid of water, and he started swimming, and he's swimming every day because it makes him feel good. And I was sitting after that, we had we sat in the group, and he told us that yesterday he couldn't swim because he forgot his earplugs or something, so he went crazy. And I told him why. I asked him why. So he said, because I couldn't swim, and I need the water calmed me down. So I said, it's not the water. And he said, what do you mean? I swim every day. Then I calm down, so what is the water? And I said, but if I remember correctly, just 2 months ago, when you went into the water, you had a panic attack and you couldn't breathe. And suddenly, it hit him, It's like, so I did that. It's not the water, It was beautiful to see his face, this understanding how it sank. That he allowed himself, when in the water, he's allowing himself to calm down, to not think. And that what makes the difference.
That's very beautiful. That's that may be a nice place to end this powerful first chapter.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.